Well, hello, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Happy Labor Day weekend. I know some of you are out of town enjoying like summer's last stand, a chance to get out of town. If that's you, well, thank you for watching this, and I hope you're having a great time. I know there's other people not feeling well, so if that's you, hope you bounce back. Either way, thanks for watching this, and hope we'll see you again real soon. All right, announcements. 3 things are coming up this month that we want to highlight. The Equip classes, our Monday night classes start not tomorrow, but the 9th, I think it is, September 9th. They start. This one is on how to study your Bible, so Nicole's going to be reading that. It probably isn't going to be what you expect, so come if you're curious. The Awe of God road trip to Ephrata. A lot of us are going to go to Ephrata here. John Bevere, please contact us if you're curious what that looks like. And the other thing, just to mention, our anniversary breakfast is going to be on the 22nd, Sunday morning, the 22nd at 9 a.m. Service is now at 10, so that gives us time to do something beforehand. So we're going to have an anniversary breakfast at 9 a.m. This week is a Tuesday, Migrant Camp Cookout trip number 5. There's only 2 left. We leave the church parking lot at 4:30. This might be your next step, so we'd ask you to consider going. We leave the parking lot at 4:30. You should be home around 7:30 or 8. Wednesday night is prayer house. That also might be your next step. You know what? If we get stuck in our spiritual walk, what might be the next thing for us to do? It might be going to a migrant camp, or it might be spending an hour intentionally in prayer. And then Friday morning, this coming Friday morning, the first Friday of September, our men's Bible study is going to start up again at 7 a.m. It's a pretty easy Bible study. There's no prep work to do ahead of time. We get together, we read a passage of Scripture. I think we're going to work our way through the book of Corinthians. We read a passage of Scripture and we ask God a few questions about it, okay? The same questions. And other stuff coming up, the 14th is the second Saturday men's breakfast. Another migrant camp trip on the 17th. And some of you have been asking about the deep dive classes, and they start again. They'll be on the 22nd, Sunday night the 22nd, and Saturday morning the 28th. We're going to talk about spiritual gifts. All right. On March 13th, 2020, my family and I went to Sharp Shopper, a local grocery store. Why do I remember such a mundane event? Well, if you remember, March 13th, 2020 was the date when COVID, we thought we were getting serious about how to handle COVID. This was the moment where we thought we got 2 weeks to stop the spread. So that was a Friday. Our kids knew they weren't going to come back to school for the next 2 weeks. It ended up being much longer than that, obviously. And that began our journey in COVID. And since then, obviously, there has been a ton of stuff going on. I remember standing in the Walmart and astonished that the whole roll of toilet paper was completely gone and completely wiped out. Not only did we have a pandemic, we also had it during an election year, which was most unfortunate. Then we had a lot of conversations about masks. Should we wear a mask or shouldn't we wear a mask? It became divisive amongst friends, unfortunately, even amongst families and churches, a lot of division. And then over the last few years, we've had to deal with culture and society with confusion about gender identity. Sociologists, some of them say, is this the fourth turning? Is this just a natural reoccurring? Every 80 years, something significant happens culturally. And I hate to bring it up, but the realistic part is I was watching a clip on a YouTube video, and it was a Catholic priest who specializes in exorcism and dealing with demonic realm sort of things. And, sobering as it might say, according to him and his perspective, the demonic realm is agitated and worked up, and there's more going on. So, all this to say, over the last few years, I have found myself in conversation with people describing our current situation as interesting times. I said, aren't these interesting times that we live in? We can use a lot of different adjectives: challenging, scary, sobering, anxious, whatever. I somehow chose the word interesting. These are interesting times. All this to say, for the next 2 months, we're going to be doing a sermon series on priorities and urgency. What should the priorities of our lives be? And should we be working with more of a sense of urgency, finding the motivation to do the right thing in these interesting times? You could put a fancier title on it. It said setting godly priorities, living with a divine sense of urgency. Okay, do we live with a divine sense of urgency in these interesting times? I like to encourage us to look at it like this. God has blessed us with the opportunity to live in these days. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if these are end times or not. In some measure they are, obviously. But God has blessed us with this opportunity. And what are we going to do with it? So like I said, for the next 6 weeks, we'll be talking about priorities and urgencies. And what we're going to do is we're going to flip-flop. 1 week we're going to talk about priorities. The next week we're going to talk about urgency. We're just going to alternate weeks. What should our priorities be? And how can we live with a sense of urgency? We're going to start off by talking about a priority. What should be one of our priorities each and every day? Next week we'll handle urgency. So this first passage, this first story that we're going to get into might reveal a little bit about your hard wiring and how God has created you, or how your circumstances and environment have shaped you. But I'm going to read a story from Luke chapter 10, and some of you might be a bit frustrated by the story. You may know the story, and this is it. It's the story of Mary and Martha. Some of you know where we're going already. The text says this: as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." So here's the question, and we're going to have people vote, the folks who are here tomorrow morning. How do you feel right now? And we're going to have people raise their hands. Who's with Martha? Who's with Mary? Who's in the Martha camp and thinks it's not right for Mary just to sit there while Martha's doing all the work? Or who's going to side with Mary and go, yeah, Mary had it right? Because I'm going to be honest, not that I'm bragging about, but in my natural hardwiring, I am kind of in Martha's camp. There's a real practical part of me. It's like, who's going to make the food if everybody is just sitting listening to Jesus? But Jesus, fortunately, has a much different opinion on the situation than I do. And Jesus says, here's the point. The distractions can misorder your priority. Misorder actually is not a word. I think it should be a word. But what Jesus is pointing out is that it's a matter of priorities and focus and attention. And the distractions of getting things ready got in the way for Martha. And that's what Jesus wants to point out. So, and there's some lessons for us to learn in this when it comes to our priorities. The first one is this: that good is often the enemy of better or best. Martha did nothing wrong. Working for Jesus was a good thing to do. We also need to be like Martha and work for Jesus. Her problem was that her service for him distracted her focus away from him. And as a result, she felt frustration and anger and just a sense of angst. All right? She was working for Jesus, but the distractions distracted her away of her focus from him. So We need to work for Jesus, but we can't be distracted away from him. Martha's problem wasn't Mary. Martha's problem was Martha. She took her eyes off Jesus. This was a Martha thing, not a Mary thing. This was a Martha thing. And again, it's an easy trap for us to fall into, that we have good intent, but we forget about Jesus and we forget what's most important. Okay? What was most important in that moment was not getting every detail and not getting everything right. What was most important was Jesus was in their house and he was teaching, and it was going to be a good night. Okay? Those details that Martha got all bent out of shape of, yes, somebody's got to do those things, but it was a reaction to doing those things that was the problem, not the actual doing those things. And again, it's an easy trap. The Martha spirit says, I got to get this done. It has more of a smaller picture, a temporal perspective. It's focusing on what is seen. It's focused on the right now, the need of the moment. The Mary spirit, instead of says, I got to get this done, the Mary spirit asks, what is God doing? It has a bigger picture in mind, more of an eternal perspective. It's focused on the unseen and not just the urgency of the moment. Then we have Jesus' reply to Martha. And this is interesting because he says, Martha, Martha. Now, none of us were there, and we don't know the tone that Jesus had. There's two possibilities. The first tone is Martha, Martha. I want to be careful I don't say it to give away the tone. One of the tones could be just love and compassion. He feels sorry for Martha because she's so bent out of shape. The second tone could almost be a little bit him expressing some frustration with her. Martha, Martha. Okay, that he's frustrated with her. Now, I don't know, it's tempted to have people vote on that too. Is Jesus' Martha, Martha out of love and compassion, or is it just out of frustration? I think it was from love and compassion. Again, Martha was doing good. She's serving Jesus, but he points out she forgot the one thing that is needed. In fact, there's kind of this odd phrase in the story. Jesus says, few things are needed, or indeed only one. That's what Jesus is pointing out to Martha. There's only one thing that's needed. Food and all these other things, that's all going to happen. But the one thing that's needed is what the Bible speaks about. Psalm 27:4. Listen to this. One thing have I desired of the Lord, that I will seek, that I will dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. That's the number one thing. That should be our priority. Spending time with the Lord, to inquire in his temple, to behold the beauty of the Lord. The one thing that's needed is what Mary chose, and that to sit at Jesus' feet, to hear his word, to pursue him, to enjoy him. That is the one thing. The psalmist, it's going to the temple and it's enjoying God's presence. But for Mary and for us, it's to sit at the feet of Jesus. Now, what does it mean to sit at the feet of Jesus? It implies a few things. It implies a readiness to accept and obey what Jesus teaches. When we want to sit at Jesus' feet, it shows that the desires of our heart are in a good place. To sit at Jesus' feet implies that we have a faith in who Jesus is. We believe in him. When you want to spend time with the Lord, it shows that you believe in him. To sit at Jesus' feet implies discipleship. It implies a commitment, okay? To sit at the feet of Jesus implies that we have a love for him and that our heart is for him. It's not just obeying, but it's obeying with a heart of love and gratitude. I found a couple quotes, Jesus feet quotes. I don't know what you think of when you think about the feet of Jesus. Unfortunately, you might just think about the crucifixion and how his feet were nailed through. But here's two more interesting quotes. If we want lives free from distraction, unrest, We must find time to sit at his feet. If we want to live lives that are free from all the distraction of these interesting times, and we want to live with peace and rest, we have to sit at Jesus' feet. And this second quote, the way of revival starts at the Master's feet. You must go there like Mary. Afterwards, you can work like Martha. Sometimes I think we jump straight to the work. We want to see revival, and what can we do to achieve it or enable it? Well, this quote says it starts with being Mary. We have to be Mary first before we can be Martha. Mary chose the one thing, a simple devotion to Jesus, loving him by listening to him. This was Mary's chosen focus. She chose this. It was her focus. People say we need revival. We need to sit at the feet of Jesus to hear his word. People say we need unity. We do. We need to sit at the feet of Jesus to hear his word. People say we need to reach the world, and yes, but that starts with sitting at the feet of Jesus. This episode teaches us the importance of discerning between what is good and what is best. All right? Good, settling for good, and it's easy to do. Settling for good can keep us from the better or the best. The episode also reveals there's at least three kinds of people who claim to follow Jesus. The first one is like Mary. Those who know how to serve, but also make it a priority to sit at the feet of Jesus. Hopefully that's where we're at. But there's also people like Martha. I'm kind of hardwired that way. Those who diligently and with good intention serve God, but neglect a continual focus on Jesus that often results in frustration. So those are the first two kinds of people that claim Christ. They could be a Mary or they could be a Martha. There's a third kind. It's the people that do neither. They're not even in the house with Jesus. They're too busy with their own pursuits to even serve or even listen to him. So there's plenty of people who claim to be Christians but are not Mary and are not Martha. They're not doing for Jesus and they're not listening to Jesus. The second point when it comes to a conversation about priorities is that we have to put the big rocks in first. So when we're here tomorrow, I have a glass jar, it's right over there, with some big rocks in it. And the big rocks won't fit in the jar unless with some pebbles too. They won't fit. You got to put the big rocks in first and then pour the pebbles in, all right? So it's just a great word picture of we've got to put the big rocks in first, okay? Lots of times we try to put the big rocks in after all the other stuff is in. Big rocks have to go in first. Jesus lived this out. Mark 1:35. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. You know, the text does not say early in the morning. It says very early in the morning. Words matter, okay? Very is a short little word, but it has something to it. Jesus made it a priority to get up very early to spend time. Again, Jesus prioritized time with the Father, so we should as well. If Jesus makes it a priority to spend time with the Father, so should we. Now, we remember the WWJD bracelet, big thing that was back in the 80s or 90s. That was a while ago. And when people think about WWJD, what would Jesus do? They think about behavior, obviously, and they also think about attitude. Well, yeah, I think it's behavior and it's attitude, but it's also pursuit. What would Jesus do? What would Jesus pursue? All right, WWJP. What would Jesus pursue? He pursued time with the Father. Now, I know this is a challenge because our days do get busy and they are full of distractions. But the challenge is to start your day with God and to let every decision flow from that relationship. Now, some of you with your biorhythms or whatever, it's easier at the end of the day, and I really don't want to make a qualm about when, but the point is we need to spend time with God on a regular basis. It's got to be a big rock. The third thing I like to mention is the importance of us to slow down and surrender. If we want to do this, if we want to put this big rock in, we have to slow down and we have to learn surrender. In 2019, a pastor named John Mark Comer wrote a book titled The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. You get the juxtaposition there, the ruthless elimination of hurry. The full title is The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry: How to Stay Emotionally Healthy and Spiritually Alive in the Chaos of the Modern World. Now, if you don't have time to read this book, your life is too hurried to read a book on the elimination of hurry, remember this line: Jesus was never in a hurry. When you look through the Gospels, you see over and over again, Jesus was never in a hurry. In fact, Lazarus died because Jesus was slow to a call to go visit him. If you want to experience the life of Jesus, you have to adopt the lifestyle of Jesus. That's a thought. If you want to experience the life of Jesus, the peace, the rest, the power of Jesus, you have to adopt a lifestyle of Jesus. And if Jesus was never in a hurry, that says something about us. Matthew 11, Jesus talked about this in kind of a tangential way. He said, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. My yoke is easy and my burden is light." Now, this word easy in the original language can also be translated well-fitting. The yokes back then by the farmers were tailor-made to fit the animal that was using it. And another point is, farmers yoked older, stronger, more experienced animals to younger animals to help them and to teach them. They learned just by watching. So they would put an old, experienced, stronger animal with a younger one, and the younger one learned just by the experience, okay? So when Jesus talks about being yoked with him, there's some things we need to remember, that Jesus is probably recognizing the fact that it's going to fit us, and he's here to do the work. It's easy. Let him carry our burden. That's why he says Jesus' yoke is easy. Now, in some ways it's easier. There's the lighter demands than the law. They're not making sacrifices to animals anymore, okay? But also because he bears it with us. Bearing or carrying alone what might be unbearable, but with Jesus, it can be easy and light when you let him, okay? So we see this passage and we might get excited about it, but we don't let Jesus carry the burdens for us, okay? That's why we need to slow down and surrender. That's the surrender part. Slow down. Jesus was never in a hurry, neither should we. Surrendering is saying, I can't. I'm going to let Jesus carry this for me. If your yoke is hard and your burden is heavy, then we can say that it isn't his yoke or his burden because you aren't letting him bear it with you. Okay, now you have a part in that. But if your yoke is hard and your burden is heavy, then we can say it isn't Jesus' yoke. It's not his burden because you're not letting him bear it with you. There's a measure of surrender. And the last thing, when you slow down and surrender, then you can be a grape and not a raisin. Now, some of you know what I'm talking about. Some of you are going to be confused, but we've talked about we want to be grapes, not raisins. Grapes abide on the vine. When a grape gets plucked off, disconnected from the vine, eventually it becomes a raisin. John 15, 4-5, Jesus said, "Remain in me and I in you, just as a branch is unable to produce fruit by itself unless it remains on the vine. Neither can you unless you remain in me. I am the vine and you are the branches. The one who remains in me and I in him produces much fruit, because you can do nothing without me. We need to slow down. We need to surrender. And when that happens, when that becomes our priority, sitting at the feet of Jesus like Mary, then we can abide in him. When we abide in him, we get our daily direction and we get our daily nourishment from him. Don't we want those two things? Daily direction and daily nourishment. Direction is wisdom. Don't we want godly wisdom, especially as we walk through interesting times? That comes when we spend time at the feet of Jesus. Nourishment, again, we live in interesting times. That's a nice way of saying troubled times. When we come to Jesus for nourishment, then we're going to have contentment and peace. If abiding, if sitting at the Jesus' feet is not your top priority, you will settle for good instead of better or best. Okay, you'll be Martha instead of Mary. If abiding is not a top priority for you, you'll fill your jar with the pebbles and the sand, and you'll try to fit the big rocks in later. Big rock priorities have to go first. If abiding is not a top priority, you will hurry and carry heavy burdens. You'll be anxious and you'll be overwhelmed. Okay? So questions we're going to ponder, you can ponder them as well. Are you Mary, Martha, or someone passing by the house? Where are you at? Are you tending to be a Martha? Just so busy, it's hard to slow down? Or maybe you are a Mary, and it's easy for you to slow down and connect. Or maybe, unfortunately, you're neither. You claim to be a follower of Jesus, but you're not doing anything for him, and you're not slowing down to listen. It's easy to be a passerby. Again, I challenge you, what's your next step to break out of this? The next question, what are your big rocks? What should be a big rock that isn't? Okay? What are your big rocks? What are your priorities? That should be easy to find out. What should be big rocks that's not a big rock? What should be a priority that isn't? When you look at your yoke mate, what do you see? Again, this might sound like an odd question, but Jesus is on the other side of the yoke. And when you look at your yoke mate, do you see him or do you not see him because you're trying to do this all on your own? Again, I hope that question, as strange as it might sound, I hope it resonates with some of you. And the last question is, how are distractions from these interesting times hindering your abiding? Okay? We do have an election coming up. There's so much division. There's ads. You can't hardly drive anywhere without billboards that might get your ire up. How are the distractions of all these things hindering you from abiding, slowing down and abiding? In reality, it should be forcing us to Jesus' feet more often. But if we're not careful, we just let those things distract us. So what is our priority? We need to put the big rocks in first. And the first big rock is just spending time consistently with the Lord. Reading your Bible, listening to Christian podcasts, praying. If you need any help with that, we'd love to. We'll give you some guidance. All right, that's it. Thanks so much. Take care, and God bless. Bye.